Welcome to Junkyard Theory, folks. Today's episode is hosted via TSML. Whenever we host something via TSML, there's always something special for the Sri Lankans. It's either a Sri Lankan born actor, Sri Lankan born composer working out there in Hollywood. But today, we got somebody who's not Sri Lankan, but his character is beloved by so many of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s watching this one little show called Robin of Sherwood. And there used to be this guy dressed in black, very silent but deadly, the Arabian, the Saracen character called Nasir. And Mark Ryan, we've got the actor who plays Nasir in the house. Mark, thank you so much for joining. Are you on,
Ah,
good sir?
are you ball one? Are you ball one?
You got it. You
There
got it.
you go.
And
Hello,
so
how you
nice to
doing?
good man. Good. So good to see you. So good to finally connect over uh, online, essentially. Uh, Mark, man, we've seen you play this badass character for like the past 30 odd years, but this is probably the first time you're talking to a Sri Lankan audience. And I want to start from the very beginning. Talk to me about your origin story. Where'd you come from? How'd you
Oh,
become Mark Ryan?
ah, I was born in a place called Doncaster in Yorkshire, and I grew up as a boy playing in Sherwood Forest. It's now called Clumber Park. It's a park, not really a forest, but I
You
grew up
grew up
literally
playing in
in
Sherwood.
Sherwood Forest and
Oh man,
playing Robin Hood inside what's called the Major Oak, which is a 1,000-year-old oak tree there, which is hollow. And as a kid, you used to be able to climb into the tree and be in the tree. And the legend was that it was Robin Hood's hiding place. So you could get in the tree and literally hide in the play Robin Hood and be in the tree, hide in the tree. And my entire family, in fact, my mother and my grandmother, there's photographs of my mum and her mum standing by the tree. It was a place that you people went in and visited. Now you're not allowed in because somebody had set fire to it, so you're not allowed to do that anymore.
cool.
But yeah, I grew up with that. So Robin Hood's Bay in Scarborough, Robin Hood's Cave in Yorkshire, all of those places I visited as a kid. So I grew up with the legend in the middle of the whole thing of the Knights Templars. There was 9 Knight Templar preceptories around the city of York. There was a whole history of the Normans and the Norman castles and all of that history in Yorkshire. So it was sort of seeped into my psyche as a child. And I started out in the music business, working in the working men's clubs as a singer, as a musician and a singer, and moved on to doing bits of television at Granada Television and Yorkshire TV, and then went to London. Was very lucky to get a show. First show I did was a show called Dean, about the life of James Dean, and then the next show was a show called Evita, which of course changed my life and career. I played in Magaldi for 2 years, and
This
then
was in West End, yeah.
in the West End, yeah, the
Okay.
Prince Edward Theatre, and then played Che Guevara for 2 years. And so I was the only, I think I'm still the only actor that Harold Prince, late great Harold Prince, director, Broadway director, producer, allowed to move from one character in the same show to being another character in the same show. So I went from Magaldi, and Magaldi was 1 week, and then the next week I was Che Guevara. And Che was just probably one of the best parts I'm ever going to get in a stage show, musical. Because he's the narrator, he's talking to the audience and he's guiding the audience through the history of the show. And it was there that a friend of mine, Lewis Collins, who did a show called The Professionals, brought Ian Sharp to see the show. And Ian Sharp was the director who directed Who Dares Wins. In America, it's known as The Final Option. And I had curly dark hair then, you know what I mean? I had hair. I know it sounds weird, but I hope you've seen it.
So that was no wig.
That was no wig. That was my
Oh,
hair. I had curly dark hair and a beard, dark beard. And he cast me in a film called Who Dares Wins in the UK. And then when he started looking around to put the Robin of Sherwood cast together, he approached me and said, "Would you like to play a character in this TV show, and I'd seen the script, and I was actually a little bit. I was skeptical because I grew up with Robin Hood with Richard Green, and obviously Robin Hood had been done several times, so I was a little bit skeptical about doing Robin Hood again. And when I read the script, I went, "Whoa, this is not at all what I thought it was going to be." This had the element of magic in it. It had that element, these layers in it, which were very complex and knotty and dark. And the characters, the merry men themselves, were different. They weren't your standard sort of characters. So I said yes, of course. And the character I was offered was a character called Edmund the Archer. So originally I was going to be Edmund the Archer. And on the first day of shooting, while I was actually practicing the two-handed sword fight with Michael, with Teddy Walsh, who stood by the prop store, Ian came up to me and he said, "You're no longer Edmund the Archer, you're now Nasir the Saracen." He said, "Can you do a sword fight with two swords?" I said, "Sure." He said, "How long?" I said, "How long have I got?" He said, "About 15 minutes. He said, "No, you've got a couple of weeks to practice." So I said, "Okay." And so that's how Nasir was born on the set. He wasn't called. It was called Edmund. Originally became Nasir the Saracen, and then Richard Carpenter, who became almost like a father figure, mentor to me. Richard Kip Carpenter was one of the nicest, smartest, most intelligent writers I've ever worked with, and this would not happen today. He called me up and he said, "Mark, we've got you in the show. We're going to write you into the show as a merry man." He said, I've written the first 3 episodes. He said, "But there's no dialogue for you. There's nothing, I've already written them. There's no stuff. What do you want to do?" And I said, "Kip, I don't need the dialogue. Give me the action. Give me the sword fights, the knife throwing, the tracking, the horse riding. Give me that kind of stuff. Give me the action stuff, because it's a visual medium. So I don't need loads of dialogue. I don't need that. Give me the action and I will speak through the action." And he said, "Have you done any research for this?" And I said, "Actually, I've just finished reading Sir Stephen Runciman's History of the Crusades. There's 3 volumes, and I'd read all 3 volumes of the History of the Crusades." And I said, "There's a weird relationship between the Knights Templar and the cult of the Assassins. Sometimes they work together, sometimes they were at war with each other, but they exchanged a lot of medical, philosophical, even navigational knowledge. They traded things like the astrolabe for seafaring and that kind of stuff." So
these are the guys who came from the Middle East, essentially.
Correct. And during the Crusades, and I found this out later on, I didn't know this at the time, particularly in Yorkshire, when the Crusaders returned from the Middle East, they often brought back servants and guardians and their retinue, basically their family, servants and stuff like that. They brought them back with them. And there were, in fact, whole villages in Yorkshire that were made of because they looked like sort of Romany gypsies. Everybody thought they were just traveling gypsies. Obviously, they spoke a different language and they looked different. And so in Barnsleydale, which is mentioned in one of the early Robin Hood poems, there was a village there where apparently they called them the Baileys. There was entire people lived in Norman castles in the little villages outside of the castle walls, and they called them Baileys. But they looked like gypsies, so people thought they were gypsies. But they were actually the remnants of the households of the Crusaders that had lived, in Jerusalem. When they came back, they brought them back with them. So it is possible, certainly possible, that there was actually a character like Nasir brought back by a Belem, because Belem did exist. There was a real character called the Baron de Belem, who was known locally as the Devil, because he was apparently believed he was possessed by a demon, and he had a castle up in Northumberland, and so all of that, it based all that in those legends and stories. And I said to him, so we can use that relationship between the cult of the Assassins and the Knights Templar, and he wrote it into the show.
Oh.
Wouldn't happen today. No,
very
right?
Rarely. So.
Call up an actor and go, "Have you got any ideas?"
Yeah.
Wouldn't happen.
But essentially, you had a hand in crafting Nasir's character, and I mean, from what I read, he was supposed to be killed off in the first episode, but they let you stay on.
That is true.
And
That is
yeah,
true. Yeah, I was
and
supposed to, after I fought with Michael, I was about to just decapitate him at the end when I got the swords at his throat. And they were supposed to come in and fill me full of arrows to save him from me. And right on the day that we were shooting, I said, "Oh, we're not doing that now. We're not going to kill him." I said, "Just look around as if to go, what's that all about?" And then they had a problem. They had to work out what they had to do with me, and that's why Richard Carpenter called me. Keep up. You've got Carpenter.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It's your arrow that Michael splits in half, right?
Yes, I believe it is. Yes, because I supposed to put the arrow, and then he splits that arrow. Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of there's no particular there's no strong ending to Nasir's character in that episode. Like you don't see where he goes or whatever, but then like later on, bands up with the merry men. And,
well, it comes when they're loosing their arrows into the pond, the flame arrows, to symbolize the death of the guys that they'd lost in the fight. He joins, then he fires an arrow over the top, which lands in the water. He finds them. He goes to them. I want to work with you guys. I want to be with you.
Gotcha. Yeah. But man, that's so cool. Like the fact that they took your opinion on board and helped you develop the character, and they wrote it in.
Wouldn't happen.
No.
Keep control of that stuff, So.
And you mentioned that that you already had some sort of sword training, and I believe you got Nassir's swords.
I've got Nassir's swords with me. I actually brought them with me. I kept them as a souvenir. So here, there, and
so cool.
And they've actually been used. I've actually used them in other shows. They appeared in an episode of Jules Verne, Secret Adventures of Jules Verne. There was a fight done with them. I've got to get them polished up. They've been sitting in a bag here for 3 years, and I've been in lockdown. But they are real cutlasses. They're actually tax excise cutlasses, because a lot of the custom and excise raids during the late 18th century were obviously done on boats. So you need a sword which is short and wieldable in a confined space, and that's why. These cutlasses are naval. They're actually naval cutlasses, because they're
the hilt is quite different from what you normally see. Like it's got these two prongs up on the side.
Well, yeah, Teddy put these together. Teddy Walsh, late great Teddy Walsh, who was our stunt coordinator and fight coordinator. He
was also the stunt coordinator on Star Wars, right?
On which one?
On Star Wars? Was it Star Wars?
No, he may have worked on Star Wars, but I think that was Teddy. You're talking about Bob Anderson.
Oh, that's Bob Anderson. Yeah, that's
Bob Anderson. Yeah, who I have the sword from that show. There, I have a sword from First Night as well. There, I have actually got the fighting sword from that. I'll try to get you out in a minute if you want to see it. But yes, these have got like a little sidebar, blade grabber, which he put on. The hilt set here obviously is not the original hilt set, because this is a 18th century blade. I think it's an 1890s blade, and he took off the naval modern hilt set and he put this more medieval looking hilt set on and put the weight there to balance it, so that it's actually balanced quite nicely. And these were quite useful for grabbing people's blades and trap a blade and pull the sword in his hand. So. Yeah,
nice.
They throw as well. I can throw. I think I did actually throw them in one episode. So
yeah,
they're small. They can rotate, and they bring the blade round and stick into something. So there you go. Nice. I've also got the sword from the Owen of Clun episode with Jason. I did a fight in the Owen of Clun episode where we were in the thing together. That's actually the sword that Jason and I used. The other part of it is over there somewhere.
Got a very, very short hilt.
That is actually one of the ugliest swords I've ever used in my life. The balance is really, really difficult, precisely because of what you're saying. The actual grip here, as you can see, it's actually on the wrong way round, but the handle seems to be on sideways, but there's actually no weight here. This is just aluminum. so it's not really pulling up the blade. But in terms of handling it, it was not an easy sword to fight with, and it sort of makes a nice noise, like a dead piece of aluminum. But if you want to see the first night sword, I can show you that, and you'll see the difference. But I've also got a oops. People might recognize this. And that's the hilt set. This is actually not from the show. This was actually made for me by a company called Albion Arms, who made me an Albion. And it's razor sharp, actually. It's very, very sharp. This would actually do somebody a proper nasty turn. Yeah. We were supposed to all have a sword of Wayland, all the boys, but I believe Phil ended up being the guardian of them, and then I think one got stolen. I don't know what he did with the rest, but yeah, that's as you can see, it's that's what we call a hand and a half. You know, you can get a hand on there and literally a half to the bump to help wield the sword about. So that's what we call a hand and a half. Great sword, absolutely lovely. Yeah.
Well, I pray for the poor soul, whoever decides to break into your house. I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, all sorts of stuff. You know, I do have the knives as well. Well, one of the knives. I've got one of the actual knives that we use somewhere back there. And
can you still throw them?
Oh yeah,
yeah. Nice.
I can throw most things. Throw an axe. Surprised my wife because she challenged me once in the garden. She said, "You know, can you throw that axe?" I said, "Sure." And she went, and I went ding into a tree. It took a couple of times, I have to say, because you have to, you know, it's about the balance and the timing. And the distance. So, but yeah, no, did it. She was like, okay.
I heard that you guys love to pull pranks on the set of Robin of Sherwood. Talk to me a bit about that.
We did. In fact, it was Nick Grace and the late Robert Addy were actually two of the worst in terms of, well, the best in terms of pulling these little things that they did. And I didn't have a lot to say, so I couldn't really verbally, you know, just join in and add things in that were funny. But obviously Nick had got lots of dialogue that he could play with, and lots of scenes where he was either in a bath or something, and he could make fun. Yeah, and he did lots of what we call outtakes, and they often set things up, and even to the point of we used to set things up that would take weeks to come to fruition. And they even wrote things into a screenplay once with one of the stunt guys had to do dialogue and Steve Dent had to gave him this dialogue and Teddy says, you've got to do this dialogue. And of course, stuntmen they hate doing dialogue. They'll set themselves on fire. They'll dive out of a plane with no parachute, but they don't like doing dialogue. And they gave him this dialogue, and so Steve was wandering around doing this dialogue where he was supposed to be up a tree and caught as a Norman up a tree, and he had to say cuckoo, cuckoo, Egbert, Egbert, and something. And they had him tied up a tree during this dialogue. It took weeks to set it up because it was his birthday, of course. So they did indeed on the day of his birthday shoot him hanging from a tree doing this dialogue, which was just. So some of these pranks went set up. Sometimes, you know, they were just spur of the moment things. Ollie Tobias did one where he had his Brabanson mercenary skin, Edgeware, doo-doppy doo-dah, Edgeware, I'm a son of Edgeware. He made this whole song because our producer, Paul Knight, another one, God rest his soul, he lived in Edgeware, which is North London's famous area in North London. He was living in Edgeware, and he made this whole song up about singing about Edgeware just for Paul Knight. So, yeah, no, we did a lot of that, and actually, that was one of the reasons why we got the guest stars that we got, because they all heard that it was a great time on the set. So you know, people like Martin Shaw, obviously Lou Collins came and did an episode. Ian Ogilvy came and did an episode. We had a lot of guest stars came and joined the show because it was the talk of the industry that we were having a good time, and if you were on the set, you were part of the gang. So it was a part of the whole atmosphere, people enjoying the show. So
I guess it's that chemistry which even the audience kind of relates to, because if you take, I don't know if you are aware, but this show has had like a very long shelf life here in Sri Lanka, and like normally you wouldn't have that for shows which were,
It
telecast back in the
ages.
80s.
The show
Yeah,
ages well. I mean,
it
I
does.
watched some episodes a little while ago when I was before we did the convention that we just did, the Hooded Man convention in Great Britain. Barnaby Eaton Jones. There you go.
Hmm.
And I watched one of the episodes again, and I was actually surprised. I know it sounds weird. A lot of actors don't like watching themselves. The only reason I like to watch stuff I've done is to learn from it, to let them go from. And I have to say, when I watch most of the Robin of Sherwood stuff, there's a couple of occasions where you go, "Oh, that was a bit painful." But for the most part, particularly episodes like Swords of Wayland, really couldn't be bettered. Really, you watch it and go, "That is great television."
Yeah.
Visually, Robert Young that directed that, absolutely amazing piece of television. The
It still
detail.
has that very, I don't know what like you said at the start, the show was grounded, it was pretty dark, and combined pagan mythology in ways that had never been done before. Like Robin Hood used to be a campy kind of story
Yeah,
in previous Hollywood interpretations, but then when this came around, it totally changed the game. And even ever since that, I guess Ridley Scott did something which was kind of okayish, but then I don't know, whatever else has come since then, it never really hit the mark quite like Robin of Sherwood.
it brought in the actual pagan concept of
Hmm.
forest being alive and the vehicle for that being Herne the Hunter, which was way in front of its time.
Yeah.
Now there's whole scientific thing, research being done on what they call the mother tree, and there's a
Hmm.
concept that in each forest there is a tree, which is the tree which basically its roots and its chemical sends out chemical signals to other
Right.
trees of its akin, basically, and that the plants and the animals in the forest communicate with each other usually through the roots of the trees, but the forest itself has almost like a collective consciousness, a brain,
Like a hive mind
hive
sort of.
mind. Yes,
Oh, wow.
and that idea, which has been researched, and they've discovered all kinds of things about how trees actually do communicate, protect each other, and send signals about, if a tree's got a disease, or they sometimes feed more nutrients to the younger trees so they grow stronger and faster and all that kind of stuff. So there's a communication system very much like in the concept that they used for what's the film about the alien planet where the Avatar.
Avatar. Avatar. Yeah.
So that concept is taken from a real scientific concept based on the idea of the mother tree. So Kit was way in front of his
Hmm.
but that the whole idea of being the guardian of the forest and the keeper of the leaves, basically the keeper of the trees. It had been around for centuries. It had never been used though in
Hmm.
a show like this. And trust me, we had a lot of trouble from some people like Mary Whitehouse, who was a big sort of Christian, supposed to be a moral,
Oh,
comment.
right. Yeah.
And you can imagine there was a certain amount of noses out of joint about using basically the then Norman church, the Christian church, as the bad guy, as the mafia, and as the pagan god being the hero. So you can imagine there was a
Hmm.
lot of discussion about that, and certain people that felt like Mary Whitehouse that it was satanic, which it wasn't, but
Hmm.
they thought that it was. That is why, in fact, Swords of Wayland had to go out in the evening after what they call the watershed, when the kids are, later. He went
Yeah.
out Saturday evening, I think at 7 or 8. I think it went for 7 till 9 or something like that, so that it wouldn't, upset the children, because there was a lot of violence in it, a lot of action, and it had to look at least semi-real. We insisted
Yeah.
if it was going to be sword play, there's going to be violence. It had to have, a moral end to the story, in the sense that, violence as a result, and you see lots of arrows thudding through chainmail into normals. But every now and again, you've got to see, and Showtime at the time didn't want to see any blood. They said we can't see any blood. It's so that's why you have arrows thudding into normals and not much blood. But you do see the results, of some of the action, and that's perfectly acceptable. It has to be that way.
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, the fact that the mantle of Robin Hood can be passed on from one person to the other, because you had two Robins in the show as well. Is that something that originated from I don't know, like the poetry from the legend?
Yeah. There are two main theories about who Robin Hood possibly was, and that is based on what the one story, of course, of Michael's Robin, who is the villager that basically becomes a rebellious character who's fighting Normans, and the other is that, of course, he was, the son of a nobleman who joined fighting against the Normans for different reasons. So there were two tracks of the story. Excuse me, and luckily for us that there was, and Richard chose for the first one, to be the Robin of the peasant, revolt type character. And then once Michael decided to lead the show, which was tough, I have to say, to deal with at the time, but I mean, we all wish Michael well, but we knew that it was going to give the producers and the writer a massive problem. And obviously we'd done 2 series, so we didn't want to see the show die, and we were worried that it might happen. But Richard Kip handled it brilliantly in the writing and changed the last episode, which he apologized to me for, because the last episode, The Greatest Enemy, was supposed to be Nassir's episode, and he came to me and said, look, I'm going to have to rewrite this episode. It originally was going to be your story, because everybody had their story within the series, and I hadn't. And he wanted to do the story about the assassin, cult of the assassins and all that. And then Michael decided to leave, so he had to rewrite it, and he amalgamated that part of the story into the last script, Greatest Enemy. And Michael, left, and then we were left with an issue of, well, what do we do now? And Kip came up with bringing in the idea of Robert of Huntingdon, and we carried on. And Jason came in and did a brilliant job.
Yeah.
Very difficult to follow. What an act to follow. You have to follow Michael, who's has established himself as this character in the show, surrounded by all that mysticism, mythical history.
He essentially made his mark as Robin.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
There's lots of debate about whether he should have stayed in the show. I always felt that if he'd had stayed with the show, he perhaps would have had a different career. But he made the decision to go and do a show on Broadway, which I saw. We went and wished him well, and we went out. Richard, Kip, and I, and Paul all went to New York to see the show. And sadly, the show, The Three Musketeers, did not survive. It was on, I think, for a week. It happens on Broadway. If a show is not hitting audience, it's gone. And the show lasted a week, and I was there when he was offered Dynasty. So, his career as life throws you these curveballs at you, and you take your chances, and he went off and did that, and Jason came in, did a great job, and we've all had such varied careers, and from that, but it was what we learned on that show. Everybody will say, Ray will say, what he learned about acting on screen, he learned from working on Robin of Sherwood. So
this is Ray Winston.
Yep.
Yeah.
Marky, it's Raymondo, where are you? What are you doing, my boy? What are you up to, son? Be good, be lucky. Yes. I actually use that voice as one of the Transformers.
I was just going to say that.
He's actually behold the glory of Jetfire. I'm a mercenary dude, you know. I'm about to open a space bridge. Michael Bay said to me, he said, who is that? Who are you doing? He said, I sort of recognised the voice, but I said, it's my mate Ray. And Ray called me up afterwards. He said, Malky, I'm going to see that film, that Transformers film. He said, you're doing me. I'm a Transformer. I'm an SR.
He identified it.
That bird spy plane. What are you doing?
He identified your voice. Like, he identified his accent in your voice.
Well, he's a Cockney, you know what I mean? He comes from London, so he's got a bit of the old London going on, you know, the old rhyming, like the apple and pears, yes. So, yeah, we threw a bit of that in for the jet fighter. So.
Awesome. Talking about careers and, like, you know, the different pathways that they've gone, yours has had, like, very interesting trajectory. You ended up doing the voices for pretty much all the Transformers on set, and then ended up as Bumblebee, Jetfire, and later on, I think in Age of Extinction as Lockdown.
As Lockdown, in fact, I worked on all 5 films on the set with Michael. So there's, if you listen carefully, they dropped in my voice in various places. Even some of the other characters that are in the show. If you listen, you'll hear me. I'm turn up as a French one. The French Transformer. If you listen carefully, I know they dropped my voice into various places, but I don't mind. I enjoyed working with Michael. I enjoyed working on the show, and it was great fun to do. You know, it's a decade. We did 5 films in 10 years. You know, like a 2-year cycle. So enjoyed doing it. It was technically a weird use of all the skills, because the first film I did assisting Bob Anderson, First Night, was the first time I was behind the camera.
You were the fight coordinator, right?
I was Bob Anderson's assistant. He asked me to assist him, and as the sword body, basically, sword dummy, and I ended up working with Richard Gere and everybody else, Ben Cross, rehearsing their fights, and it was a real lesson. I mean, being in front of the camera, you're not always aware of what's going on behind it, and so this was the first time that I actually was behind the camera with Bob in a big film. I mean, this was a $120 million, dollar film, and they built that castle. They built Camelot Castle, which you see there, the back lot, Pinewood, and it was an amazing set, absolutely incredible set, which they tore down. Very sad to see it torn down, but they built it and knocked it down. That's what they did.
I thought that was a real location.
No, that castle actually was built at Pinewood Studios. Yeah, I know. Incredible. And so everything I learned about, that behind the camera stuff, I learned from Bob on First Night, and he was such a master of working with the director, working with the actors, working with the stunt guys, working with the prop guys. He had the whole thing down. So I just basically followed him around. And it's interesting because I did have actors that were working on the film came up to me and going, "What are you doing? You're an actor. You should be in front of the camera doing something." And I said, "I'm learning more here than I would ever do in front of the camera," because he had to deal with the politics, the money. He had to deal with the egos. He had to deal with everything. And I was there, and how he dealt with people and how he was able to get stuff done, and turn it into an art form. The sword fight concept as a drama scene, as opposed to just being two people bashing away at each other. And in fact, when I did King Arthur, Stellan Skarsgård, wherever you are, Stellan, I wish you well. He came to me, Stellan, and said, "I've got to do this sword fight." He said, "Apparently you're going to be choreographing this sword fight." He said, "I've never done a fight on screen in my life, let alone a sword fight. How are we going to do this?" He said, what's I said, I stole from Bob Anderson. I said, a sword fight is a drama scene where the blades have the dialogue. So it's actually a conversation in steel. "Oh, nearly got you. Oh, nearly got you. I'm going to come this way. I'm going to go that way." And it's got beats. the fight has got beats. So we'll have this beat, that beat, the drama beat. You know, each fight will have a dramatic beat. So don't think of it just as a fight. Think of it as a drama scene. And he went, as if, you know, a bell had gone off in his head. He went, oh, okay. So we cut it into sections. So we get each little section. Each section will have a beat, and you think of it as a drama scene. You know, it's an acting scene. It's not just like you bash away at each other. That's not the way it works. And we'll do it that way. And we did, and Stellan made a fantastic job of it. But I stole that, and I think I told him, I said, I'm stealing from the best I've ever worked with, and that's Bob Anderson. So that's how it came about.
Wow, that's cool. That's a really nice way of looking at it, rather than, you know, just like a mindless battle between two blades. It's a proper dialogue. It adds gravity. It adds gravity and story
And drama, you know, and you've got to put
exactly.
that in. And the interesting part of that was when in the film in King Arthur, where Stellan, his character, kills Mads Mikkelsen, and Mads looks up to the sky, and he's got the sword stuck in him, and he looks up, and the eagle flies above him. It was a symbolic moment in the film. And, you know, he died, and then he kills Mads and he dies. I went into the tent because I was out watching it closely on the set, on the camera. And I went into the Video Village tent just to see what it looked like on screen. And there was one of the girls there that was a continuity lady. And as I came in, she looked at me and she went, "You evil." She said that. And she was crying. She was crying. She said, that is the most horrible. I said, it's got to be horrible. That's the whole point. You know, he's such a great, Matt's character was such a great character that you have to really hate the bad guy. You have, and that was the drama beat that turns, that then Arthur sees that happen and has his fight with Cerdic. So it was a great drama beat in the film, and it was effective, apparently. So, you know, that's the way I told Stella we were going to do it. We did it, and he was fantastic in the film.
Yeah, and it shows. It definitely shows. So, coming back to voice acting, I just want to come back to this for a little bit. Whenever you oscillate between characters, how does that play up here? Talk to me about that process.
I've got one of those weird brains that. Well,
yeah, I could see your gears turning behind your eyes ever since you played Nasir back then.
Yeah, well, Nasir was actually pretty easy to play because, as I say, I was steeped in the legend, where I grew up with it and the ethos of the forest. I grew up with it, so it naturally flowed through. And I was very physical in those days, you know. I could ride horses and throw knives and use bow and arrow and all that kind of stuff. So it was just a natural step. On the set with Michael, I've got one of those weird brains that I can be looking at the TV screen right now. I can look at my computer screen, looking at you, looking at all the folks out there in Sri Lanka. And in my mind's eye, I can put Bumblebee behind the screen. I can actually see it. I can do it now. I can actually see Bumblebee sitting on my balcony right now as I'm looking at your screen. I don't know what that is, whether it's an active imagination thing. So when we're on the set, obviously, the only robot we actually built was Bumblebee, and he was 17 feet tall, but he weighed 2 tons. So moving him around the set was a 3-act drama. So we did go to most of everything else being CGI. So it was an Industrial Light and Magic, an ILM pole with a light on top so that people had something to look at. But there was no robot there. And but I could see them in my mind's eye. If somebody said, no, Optimus is there, Bumblebee's there, whatever's there, I can see that in my mind's eye as I'm looking at the set. And so whether it's Stanley Tucci or John Turturro or whoever is else doing dialogue, when they stood there, this is all new to them. So they were like going, I don't really know what the hell's going on. And I would then walk them through the dialogue. I'd do the dialogue with them on the set, and they had something to react to. And we had speakers on the set. But I was also wired up for sound, so I can hear them, I can hear me, I can hear that. You know, I've got this, I've got a handheld microphone, so I could I knew what was going on, and I was able to, you know, manage it that way on the set, and I could see it, so I knew what robot was where, because often Michael would say, okay. In fact, it happened the very first time. The very first scene that we did in the first film was with the Wiki House, and we had what's called animatics, and they're like line drawings of the on a screen, which you have the scene, and they've just put the animatics into the scene. And so I started to laugh. Michael was showing me this, and I was laughing. He said, "Can you see that?" I said, "Yeah, yeah." He said, "It's funny. You've got giant alien robots hiding in a driveway in a house in somewhere in Los Angeles." He said, "You can see it." I said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I can see it. It's funny. It's funny. It's a funny scene, right?" He went, "Great." And that's how it went for the next 10 years. You know, he would go, robot, robot, robot. This one's here. This one's here. I'm going to pull this thing. And sometimes the crew would come up and go, "What are we doing?" And so I would tell them what we were doing and where they were and where the robots were and all that kind of thing, you know.
Could you give us a little demonstration of, I don't know, maybe a Bumblebee impression or something?
"Permission to speak, sir. I wish to stay with the boy." And that was literally thrown in at the last minute. I had no idea they were actually going to do that, because the script I had, Bumblebee didn't speak. So when Michael said to me, "Just say this," right? Just gave it to me at his office down in Santa Monica. He said, "Just record these lines." And I did. And I had no idea he was going to use them. And he threw them into the film. So that's how it came about. And obviously then I've done the games and various things since. But yeah, I'm physically on the set, being everybody. I've been Optimus Prime, transform and roll out. So I've been everybody on the set.
That's so cool. And even before the other voice actors were cast, you were playing all these roles on set. So
Yes,
I guess it pays to have that kind of imagination, right? Because like working with Michael Bay is no easy task. People say it's mayhem, but for you, I guess it's you thrive on it.
Michael works very fast, and he expects you to bring your A game and be ready to rock. And all I can tell you is this, which probably is the best measure for me. I know people find it a little confusing sometimes, because his brain is moving so quick. He wants to move. He wants to make his time. He wants to make his day. And we talked about it once, because he said he's got the film burned in his brain. So in his mind, he's read the script and he's already visualized the script in his head. So he knows what he wants it to look like. And it's very difficult to see that if you can't, you know, kind of see what he's trying to create on the screen. And I've just got one of those minds where I'm apparently able to do that. And when we were doing the last film with Sir Tony, Anthony Hopkins, who I went to keep calling him Sir Anthony. He kept saying, no, Tony, call me Tony. We were stood there chatting one morning, and Anthony Hopkins said to me, he said, "How many of these have you done?" I said, "This is my 5th one." He said, "I've worked with a few directors." And I said, "I know you have." He said, "I've never seen a director do what Michael can do. I've never seen a director pick up a camera, pick up a bit of sound equipment, pick up lights, pick up this, do it." He said he can do every job on this set. He knows about special effects. He knows about stunts. He knows about CGI. He knows about what the camera to use, whether it's 3D or, you know, IMAX or whatever. He said his knowledge on the set is amazing. He really is a genius. And if Anthony Hopkins says that about you, you know, you've got to take it seriously. And sure enough, you know, Michael is a creative genius. I understand why sometimes it's a bit frustrating and a bit confusing, because he wants to move. He wants to keep the film moving all the time. And he's his own first assistant. He doesn't need a first assistant on the set, because he's telling everybody what he wants to happen. And if you can keep up with that, great. And that's why sometimes it seems like it's a bit confusing mayhem.
Confusing.
But
Yeah.
actually, it's not. There is a method to his madness, and he gets it in the can. You know, I know it can be difficult to keep up sometimes, but I for some reason I just was able to, and understood what he was trying to achieve, and so I was usually there in the right place at the right time.
I went back and watched all the behind the scenes featurettes from all 5 movies. Like this is something I did while having lunch over like a 2-week period. And man, I mean, it's honestly a delight seeing this guy doing what he does, because like you said, he always wants to keep people moving. Like whoever captured behind the scenes captured that too.
Well,
I don't know.
he's been doing it. He wanted to. Obviously, it's in his blood, and
Yeah.
And I don't mean this to sound as an insult. I mean it to sound as a compliment. He's a geek. You know, if he gets a new camera, he wants to know how it works. He wants to know, he's fiddling with it and playing with it, and you know, and what's the best way to get the best out of the camera.
Yeah.
And his mother tells a great story about him blowing the house up. He said when he was a boy, because he was into, you know, doing the special effects and stuff like that. She said he came home one day and all the windows in the house blown out. He'd blown something up in the house, making one of his little films somewhere, and he set fire to something, and they came, all windows were blown out of the house. The blast had blown the glass out of the place, and so yeah, it's been in his blood and in his psyche since he was a kid, and it's, you know, he lives for it, and
Yeah.
I can respect that, and I also understand though, however, how that can be confusing. More than one person, I won't name names, has come up to me on the set and gone, help, I don't know, I don't understand what is going on. And in fact, one actress, I want to get you know, in terms of Tales Out of School, she came to me and said, you know, she said, what the hell, what am I going to do? I said, I'll be there on the set when we're ready to, I'll give you the first line. Just look at me, give me a nod, whatever you need, and I'll, you know, this is what, this is here, this is there. And it happened quite a lot that people went, what the hell is going on? And I would just jump into the hole and go, okay, I'm going to give you the line, and we'll work, you know, whatever you want to do. So, yeah.
Super cool.
We got it in the can, and the films were very successful. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's I think
It was entertainment at the end of the day. You know, you switch your brain off, go enjoy something for like a solid 2.5 hours, and walk away feeling, I don't know, for me at least, I was
it's a
entertained.
ride. It's like going to Universal and doing the ride. You sit there and do the ride, and you switch off and you enjoy it. You know what I mean? So the whole thing is that you sit in the cinema and you just forget about life for the 2.5 hours that you're sitting there and paying the electricity bill and taxes and all that kind of stuff. And you sit there and hopefully you go on this ride with these people in this film. You know, it's an entertainment. It's supposed to be an entertainment. Although there's been lots of questions, and just recently it's come up again. I was asked about whether I thought it was possible that there were somewhere out in the universe a race of sentient mechanical aliens. And I said, well, why not? Why not? I mean, at some point in the proceedings, our consciousness will one day probably be transferred from body to body. You know what I mean? They'll find a way to move this consciousness into another, whether it's AI or a simulated version of our personalities, into some kind of, you know, whether they grow the body, you know, in a lab, or whether it's, you know, they'll find a way to do that, and you'll load it into, you know, basically a computer. They'll find a way to do that. And I said, so it's possible that out there somewhere in the universe, there is a race of semi-mechanical aliens, you know, out there. Maybe they've even visited us, we don't.
Natural progression, that's where it's going to lead, I guess. You never know.
Well, we'll have to do something, because if we do want to go out in the universe at the moment, our current science, which I have my own belief about, but human beings are not well designed to spend a lot of time in space. So they're going to have to find a way of making the environment within a ship that can, you know, go through the dimensional barriers. Because obviously, just trying to do the distances is not going to work. There must be another way that you can get from A to B throughout the universe without doing the actual distances. There's lots of suggestions about portals and wormholes and black holes, and finding a way to actually transdimensional travel. So you pop in one part of the universe and come out somewhere else. And you don't have to travel that distance. I mean, that is being discussed seriously, scientifically. How are we going to make this work? Because the distances are just too big. So we have to find another way to do it. And it's being discussed, scientifically as a theory. Well, that would be one way, would be to pop in and out of these dimensional portals if we can find them. And our bodies would have to be able to withstand that type of travel. And at the moment, we're pretty, vulnerable in space. So
fragile,
So maybe one day we'll evolve to be able to do it.
Looking forward to that. Mark, this has been a really, really interesting session. Before we wrap up, though, you're also an author. Talk to me very briefly about the work that you've done on DC Comics, your autobiography. Just quickly tell me a bit about that.
This all started at school. I was always writing at school. In school, as well as doing musical stuff, I was writing stories at school. I loved it. The best present I could be given was a blank, book, and I could just sit and write my stories, adventures, and stuff like that. So it goes all the way back to my childhood, and obviously with the tarot. I was getting asked questions at conventions about the symbolism of Robin of Sherwood, which I understood because I grew up with it. And it was actually Cheska Potter that suggested we did a tarot deck, and all of these archetypes, Jungian archetypes, were in history put into it. So that was the first one I wrote, was the Greenwood Tarot, which is still a cult success, cult deck to this day. And what we did, the system that we used was called the Wheel of the Year system, because it's the natural system, the rhythm of the cycle of nature in Northern Europe, but and in the UK. That's why Stonehenge is round, because it's basically a wheel, as opposed to Kabbalah, which Kabbalah seems to be much more of a construct and difficult to understand. So we based Greenwood Tarot on the Wheel of the Year system, with the animals and the symbolism of the animals and the characters within it. We did that for Wildwood as well. John Matthews and I, then we redid the Wildwood Tarot, which was originally Greenwood Tarot was going to be called Wildwood Tarot, but the publishing company thought it was too sexy. So it ended up being called the Greenwood ended up being the Wildwood, and then we did the Wildwood Tarot, and then we wrote Wild Magic, which is a little workbook that goes with it. Then at the moment, right now, we're doing one called the Sherwood Oracle, which is, again, it's an oracular system based on the myths, legends, and archetypes, obviously in the Sherwood legend. So we're working on that right now. It'll be out next year through Sterling Publishing in New York. The artist is brilliant. John and I working together again, and Yvonne Gilbert is the artist, and the art is just stunning. So that'll be out next year. Yeah, I've written for DC Comics. I wrote The Pilgrim for a company called Comic Mix. With Mike Grell and I are going to republish the rest of that, because it got frozen in time, basically. And again, it's one of those ideas that has found its time. There's a show called The Skinwalker Ranch, Curse of Skinwalker Ranch, which is a show about this ranch where a lot of strange things happen.
Yeah.
And this character, the Pilgrim, is what would be described in the show as a hitchhiker. It finds an entity that gloms onto people's energies, and in this case, it gloms onto this Tom Dillon's energy, and so it's about that. It's about otherworldly things, but in a scientific, put in a scientific framework, because a lot of research has gone into what possibly how our consciousness works and how consciousness outside of the body works. So there's a lot of science now being done about understanding how it works on the subatomic particle level.
Yeah.
And, even in what they call superstring theory, there's a concept of the 12-dimensional universe. So it's based on that, and a 0 point energy field, and how to use that. So Pilgrim was based on that. Yeah, and I wrote Hold Fast after going to Africa to do Black Sails. It was such an amazing experience. But I had a lot of sitting about to do down there. So I started writing my memories of various things. And it was John Matthews that again said to me, maybe we should record this as a series of interviews, which we did, about my life and about my experiences in the West End. And so we turned it into a biography. So Holdfast, there's a lot of stuff in Holdfast. It's got a lot of, it's as I said at the beginning of the book, names and dates have been changed to protect the guilty. There's a lot of stuff in there that I went, oh, we got to be careful with some of this stuff, because I've had this other career, a side of this as being an investigator and private investigator in California, and I've trod down some very dark alleyways, but hopefully have done some good for some people somewhere. So I worked a lot with the Indian tribes here, which I enjoyed tremendously, I have to say. I got on a lot well with the American indigenous tribes in their casinos. Which
is this book available? Sorry, is this book available on Amazon?
Yeah. Just type in online the Holdfast. I think it's what they call print on demand. So you just order it, print it, and send it to you.
So link's gonna be in the description below, folks. So if you're interested, go check it out.
I talk a lot about Robin of Sherwood. I talk a lot about Black Sails. I talk a lot about First Night. I talk a lot about Evita. Basically the progression of my, stories and sort of backstage stuff.
Brilliant. Mark, thanks so much for doing this. This has been a real delight.
Thank you. My honestly, my sincere thanks and love to everybody in Sri Lanka that watches the show. I mean, we're all aware of the fact that it's there. I talked to the boys about it. We've all been going, Sri Lanka, 30 odd years later, who would have thought it? So trust me, the cast is aware that you guys are into the digging the show all this time later. So trust me, we are aware of it, and we're very grateful for your support.
Thank you for making our childhood, sir. And hopefully, let's try to get a full cast reunion maybe sometimes.
A what, Terry?
A full cast reunion like this?
Oh, no, I'd love to do that. Yeah. If we can work out how to do it, if we want to try and do it online as a group Zoom type call, I'm sure we can make people available for it. I'll have to see what we can
Let's make it happen.
Getting everybody in the same place at the same time is difficult now, because we're all in far-flung corners of the world.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you did it as a Zoom, though, it wouldn't be so difficult. But to get everybody in the same place is now, because Clive obviously is down the road, but, Ray's could be in Spain, he could be anywhere where he's working, in Italy or Sicily. And Jason's in the Bahamas or in Scotland or whatever. So trying to get everybody together physically is tough. But trust me, I'm not saying this because it's not true. I'm saying it because it's we're all still friends after all this time. Judy, Nick, everybody, we're pals, and we have a bond of that experience which you rarely get in a show. At the end of a show, people disappear, and here we are all this time later, and it's like nothing changed. When you see us together, you'll see us all talking exactly the same way as we did when we were making the show. Nothing's changed. It's fantastic.
So I don't know, man. I'm really looking forward to getting everybody on board, probably on a Zoom call and doing that reunion, because over here in Sri Lanka, this show meant a lot, and it still does mean a lot to so many people.
Thank you.
So has your work, your voice work, your work on Black Sails. It's been amazing, and sir, thank you so much for doing this. To the good folks over at TSML, thank you so much, and thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you.
Keep an eye out for Junkyard Theory. We're probably going to have a little storytelling workshop like we teased a few weeks back. So within the next 2 weeks, we're probably going to have this. Mark, there have been multiple requests in the comments to do Bumblebee's voice, which you've done, but let's end it with probably one line from Bumblebee.
One line from Bumblebee.
Yep.
Are you Bo One? I wish to stay with the Sri Lankan fans. Yes, I do. Permission to speak. Permission to speak, sir. Yes.
Mark, thank you so much.
No problem. Thank
Till
you
next
for
time,
asking.
guys.
Take care, everybody. Bye bye.